Michelle, take it away.
Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to today's Local Infrastructure Hub session. My name is Michelle Jolin, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Results for America. Our session today is co-hosted by our fabulous partners, the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and is supported by our funders, Bloomberg Philanthropies, Ballmer Group, Emerson Collective, Ford Foundation, and the Kresge Foundation. Today's session will provide you with insights to help you complete applications for the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program. The EECBG is designed to support states and local governments as well as tribes to implement strategies that will reduce energy use and fossil fuel emissions and to improve energy efficiency. Back in September, we had a session with Energy Secretary Granholm, where she talked about the importance of this program. And today, we have another great guest from the Department of Energy, Andi Mirviss, who's the Management and Program Analyst at the Department of Energy. And Andi is overseeing the EECBG program at the Department of Energy. So she's exactly the right person you want to be hearing from today as you think about your applications. So Andi, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you all so much for having me this afternoon. I'm delighted to be joining you. And thank you so much to everyone that is working at the local infrastructure hub and on the ground to ensure the best possible results from the EECBG program. It's a real privilege to be able to be speaking with you. As you mentioned, my name is Andi Mirviss, and I lead stakeholder engagement and communications for the EECBG program. So what I'm going to do today is to provide just a bit of background about the program, make sure we hit some key points about application deadlines, et cetera, and then to spend some time as well talking about some principles that you might consider for maximizing the potential benefit for your EECBG allocation. And then we'll hold some time for Q&A as well. I'm sharing my screen. I think that seems to be working. So I will go ahead and move us along. Before I dive into EECBG, I just wanted to share that the program comes from a new office at the Department of Energy, the Office of State and Community Energy Programs, or SCEP. SCEP's goal is to be the nation's front door to DOE and to serve as an access point for states and communities to find assistance and programs that will assist them. SCEP manages a portfolio of nearly $16 billion in funding from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Inflation Reduction Act, and annual appropriations. And our aim is to be there for you to help you navigate the federal grant process and to find the funds that would be best for your communities. So now a bit about EECBG. The EECBG program was initially authorized in 2007 under ARA, or the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act. This is only the second time that it has received an appropriation from Congress. And it's the second time that there are formula grants for cities, towns, counties, and tribes from DOE. This time, under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which passed in 2001, Congress appropriated $550 million in flexible formula grant and competitive funding for the EECBG program for the fiscal year 2022. These funds will remain available until expended. They are highly flexible funds, and we strongly encourage you to think about energy justice and environmental justice as you consider how you might use them. So how is the funding broken down? While the EECBG program is massive in terms of its scale, it will reach more than 2,700 communities, serving more than 250 million Americans, approximately 75% of the total US population. And the vast majority of the program is allocated via formula grants to local governments, states, and tribes. So the following figures were determined by statute in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, but 68% of the grant funding, or approximately $300 million, will go directly to 1,878 local governments. That's towns, that's cities, that's counties. 28%, or nearly $125 million, will go to states, and states are required by law to distribute at least 60% of their funds to local governments that are not eligible to receive a formula grant from DOE. And then 2%, or nearly 9 million, are allocated to tribes, to the 775 federally recognized tribes. However, 2% of the grant funds are set aside for competitive grants to local and state recognized tribes and teams of those governments that are not eligible for formula grant funding from DOE. So if you're not eligible for formula grant funding, you still have 2 bites at the apple. You can talk to your state energy office and learn about how they plan to distribute their funds. You can also apply for competitive grant funding, about which much more information will be released very soon. So a little bit about the process and timelines. So the most important kind of takeaway here is that the application window is open for states, local governments, and tribal governments. But the most important thing within that is just to take a deep breath and note that you have plenty of time to apply. So I know most of the folks on the line today are from cities, towns, etc. You have until January 31st, 2024 to submit your application. As you may know, the first step in that process is the pre-award information sheet, which is due on April 28th. That's a relatively simple information sheet that you can submit to us. We mostly just want to know who will be the point of contact in your city or town. And that is just by return email to us. But you really do have a full year to apply, which is why we're so glad that you're attending sessions like this to think about how you can be most thoughtful in leveraging your funds. So a little bit more about the application timeline. We will have quarterly application periods ending in April, late July, October, and January. So if you want to receive your funds earlier, which we strongly encourage you to do once you know what you would like to do, we will expedite those the review of those applications based on the periods that you submit. And there are also some application areas that can expect expedited reviews. So those include applications from states. It also includes entities that are following a couple of different elements that we think would be very valuable for the EECBG program, including following blueprints, which I'll talk about a little bit more shortly. Or applications that include teaming. So if you plan to team up with a neighboring county or town and only submit one application, that will expedite your timeline. Additionally, if you design your program to benefit disadvantaged communities, that will expedite your timeline as well. And finally, applications that are focused solely on strategy development or other activities limited to planning, analysis, and stakeholder engagement, that will expedite your timeline as well. A couple things to know about what might make a review take a little bit longer. Some might include if you require extensive NEPA review. So if you are doing a major construction or might have ground disturbance, that will take a little bit longer to review because it does require NEPA approval. On to the next slide. Okay, so what can you use EECBG funds for? Well, the EECBG program is designed to be highly flexible, and there are 14 different eligible use areas covering a broad range of projects and programs. So eligible activities range from creating and developing energy efficiency and conservation strategies to deploying technologies that reduce emissions and creating installing technologies that generate renewable electricity. I also want to note that the bipartisan infrastructure law expanded EECBG's authorizing legislation. So now you can use EECBG funds to finance renewable energy projects like building out electric vehicle infrastructure or developing community solar projects to serve under-resourced communities. So we hope that this flexibility will help you to enable a truly place-based approach and think about what's really best for your community. I also do want to highlight one thing, which is that we are offering 2 different kinds of ways to apply for the program. You can pursue the traditional grant option, or you can pursue a voucher. We will be having a webinar with more information about vouchers next week on April 13th. But the general idea is that we know, particularly for some of the more resource-strapped places, that the process of applying for a federal grant and then managing it can be very cumbersome. And so we've designed a voucher program that we think can help reduce some of those requirements. vouchers first can be applied for technical assistance. So you could, rather than receiving a cash grant and going out to seek your own consulting support, DOE could provide that to you in a range of different areas, including policy planning and program design, building retrofit planning and design, and community and stakeholder engagement, and more. You also could apply for an equipment purchase and installation rebate for a range of different elements, including efficient materials and technologies used to retrofit buildings like HVAC equipment, heat pump water heaters, etc. You could use it for electric vehicles, weatherization materials, etc. So I think we encourage folks or entities that are receiving less than $250,000 to use grants or use vouchers, but of course it's up to you. Okay. So how might you consider maximizing your EECBG program funds? I have a couple of different principles that I wanted to share. And of course, DOE, this is a formula grant program. So if you decide that you'd like to do something and it's eligible, then we are very happy to have you do that. But there might be a couple of different principles that you carry with you as you consider. So the first one is about dreaming big. We know that sometimes use these funds to address programs or projects that are already in the works that you were going to do anyway. But we really encourage you to think differently. What does this influx of funds grant you the space to do that you otherwise might not have been able to? You have the full backing of Department of Energy-based technical assistance. You have a ton of support, I know, from the great folks at the local infrastructure hub and more. How can you use this moment to not just do something that you were already planning to, but really to think big? The second point I want to mention is about following the data. There are a lot of flashy ideas out there about new technology, but we want you to really ask yourself a simple question. Given the funds you have, how can you have the most impact on promoting energy efficiency and conservation? If you don't have the data to know what will have the most impact, consider checking out our blueprints to help you identify what might work, or also to conduct audits and to see where in your community you might have the biggest impact. Next, we encourage you to think about EECBG program funds as seed funding. We know that you are receiving less funds than you might have under initial funding under ARA. It's 1/6 the amount of investment. So rather than thinking about doing a whole lot with very little, think about long-term implications of using your funds strategically. Maybe you can set up a pilot program to attract further private sector investment down the road. Or perhaps maybe you can use the funds to run energy efficiency audits of local community centers to make a stronger fundraising case for upgrades down the line. Really thinking about it as seed funding for future investment can help to maximize. Finally, I want to underscore that you're not alone in working through this. The administration strongly believes in putting forth a whole of government approach to fighting climate change. And so DOE has ample technical assistance to support. I want to highlight two of them here. One are support in developing your energy efficiency and conservation strategies. So you'll be able to do that actually for free, to have up to 10 hours or so in support with our national labs to develop those strategies. So if you feel like you need to start with something, but you don't want to put your money into a strategy, we actually have technical assistance for that. Secondly, I want to highlight a new program we'll be launching called Field Fellows, which is basically a program in which you can access additional staff from DOE to help manage your programs. That will be a competitive program. We don't have enough folks to go around, but I want to highlight that as you're thinking about how you'll actually be able to manage the work that you're doing. And then lastly, I want to end just by highlighting the importance of promoting energy justice, not just in your goals, but also in the process of how you are working on making your decisions. It's not really just about what you do, but it really is about how you do it. So first, I'd like to remind you to consider who is in the room when you make decisions. There are folks, community nonprofits, alternative utility groups, and otherwise that have been doing this work for years, and they really do have on-the-ground experience about what different community needs are. We encourage you to bring them into the process early and often. And secondly, I encourage you to think about what kind of double bottom line you could create. especially when it comes to workforce development. If you intend to do construction or building installations, could you take a Justice 40 oriented approach to training new workers or bringing in more people into industry? If you're planning on making business-based investments, might you consider focusing on small businesses owned by veterans, minorities, or women? And just thinking about how you can achieve that double bottom line down the road. The last thing I want to do is just to highlight our upcoming webinars and programs. So we have several different webinars forthcoming, including a voucher webinar this Thursday. I know there's a lot of interest and questions about vouchers that we're fielding, and so I want to point you there. And also want to remind you about our technical assistance. The blueprints will be launched next week, so keep an eye out for that for more information as well, in addition to more information about our technical assistance. So I will leave it there. Thank you for the time, and I will stop sharing my screen as well.
Andi, that's so helpful. Really, really appreciate your insights and tips and direction on successful applications. We're now going to open the Zoom for audience questions. And so we want to ask you all to come off mute and ask Andi your question. And I'm going to kick it off with a question from Mayor Turk.
Good afternoon, probably morning for some folks. Just curious, so we're eligible for formula funding. And I wanted to know that when we take advantage of that first round of funding, would we be eligible? I know there's a later deadline for the non-formula funded entities and other entities. Would we be eligible to apply for subsequent funding, even though we've gotten the formula funding?
No. So I'm glad you asked. Formula, the competitive program is only eligible to entities that are did not get formula allocations. So obviously for other formula-based programs that might be coming out down the road, of course you might be eligible for those, but for EECBG specifically, no, they're two separate programs. That's a great question. I'm glad you asked. Thanks
for the clarification. Thanks for doing these infrastructure hub things. Are awesome and helpful. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I think Lisa McNally has a question.
Yes, good morning. It is good morning here. I was curious about the technical assistance that you mentioned, specifically the field fellows. Like, are they going to be maybe even available this year as we develop our applications, or is this something that, you know, is only something available after we've accessed our grant or our voucher?
So that's a great question. You would apply for them sort of adjacent to developing your application, and then they would be assigned after once you, so more for program implementation. But as you're thinking about support in developing your application, I want to just remind you about the support that you can get from the national labs in developing your energy efficiency and conservation strategy. So that's one way we're aiming to help you in developing your application as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Super helpful. So I see we have a question from Katrina Michailova. Do you want to ask your question?
Oh, hi, everyone. I'm going to speak for City of St. Louis. So due to lack of staffing, we are going to pursue voucher option. And my question was regarding field fellow. Would it be available to us as well, or only for a grant pathway? Thank you.
Only for grants.
Okay, thank you.
And Andi, we have a number of questions on the blueprints. So could you talk a little bit more about the blueprints and what they're going to look like, case studies, best practices, templates?
Sure. Yeah. So the blueprints will be some combination of what you just shared. And I think the main thing to bear in mind about them is they are essentially what DOE is saying are projects that we know are evidence-based, that we know are eligible uses, that we think are good ways to put your feet forward and kind of thinking about how you would do this. So they are certainly they include step-by-step processes for how you might go about, let's say, for example, doing energy efficiency audits in municipal buildings. And we kind of have specific examples of how you might do that from a step-by-step perspective. But one thing I actually want to make sure I underscore is that pursuing a blueprint topic does not mean that you have to follow every single step. We know that every place is different. We know that you're going to have different requirements, et cetera. And so choosing a blueprint topic really means choosing a blueprint topic. It does not mean following a prescribed process by which you have to go about it. Because I know sometimes there can be some confusion there.
Could we hear from Seth? You have a question?
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned using these dollars to attract more private investment down the line. Just looking for some ideas on how that could work. Thank you.
Sure. I think I named two in the presentation, so I can highlight those as well. One is, I think you might consider running a small pilot. So for example, you could test out a very small micro community solar project, for example, that could attract more investment from solar companies down the road. Or you could run building audits in certain neighborhoods or for community centers to make a stronger case for fundraising for retrofits. So those could be some examples for what you could do. Another could be partnering with businesses at the outset to expand your investments and think about how they could be a part of kind of leading the way as a community to a more energy efficient future.
So Louisa, Frank has a question, an eligibility question that probably is of interest to many others. Louisa, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. So we are looking into installing LED lighting in our city parks. That's one of our ideas. But one, I want to make sure that's an eligible expense. And then number two, if we think of other ideas, is there someone we can run our ideas by just to make sure they're eligible before we hit the ground running?
Sure. So I can't confirm that an idea is perfectly eligible at the outset. You have to go through the full application process for total confirmation. So apologies for the technicality there. But generally speaking, yes, lighting is one of the eligible uses for the program. I think it is number 4, but don't quote me on that. That is outlined in statute, as long as they're sort of public utilities. But I do want to remind you that it's upgrades that are eligible, not installation of totally new builds. So that is something that sometimes folks get tripped up on as well. As far as running ideas by us, yes, absolutely. I can share my screen. Or I can just drop it in the chat, but we do have an inbox. Sometimes we can get a little bit backed up in there. Always encourage folks to just ping us, but we're happy to hop on the phone to run ideas by us as well if you need. You can also just email us and we'll get back to you, letting you know what may or may not be eligible as well.
I think it'd be great if you wanted to drop that in the chat. It looks like there's a lot of eligible use questions, and I think that's always an important way to start the process is double checking on that. So the next question from Barbara Lee.
Thanks so much. Sorry, having some issues with my screen. We're looking to implement energy upgrades at low-income multifamily housing, and I'm wondering if any of your vouchers or blueprints embody that type of project or other similar Justice 40 in-community partnership projects.
Yeah, so we will be having a blueprint about retrofits coming out. I don't want to suggest that it has all the answers about what is best in your community for the best kind of community partnership there, but it certainly links to other resources about best practice for that. I think one important thing to remember with vouchers is if you're thinking about equipment, right, and thinking about taking a technical assistance or a rebate for that, DOE doesn't have a specific Justice 40 oriented approach to vouchers. It's sort of up to you to think about where you will deploy it. What the voucher option does is it should cut back on some of the reporting requirements that you have to actually access the funds to use in the retrofit or upgrade, I should say.
Thank you.
Excellent. And I'm going to give the last question to Dave, our partner at the US conference. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Hi, thanks, Andy. I'm wondering if you could comment on whether these funds can be used to encourage the uptake or use of Inflation Reduction Act residential and small business renewable tax credits. It seems to me we want to try to maximize the use of those credits. Would that be an appropriate and good use of these funds?
That's a great question. So you can use these funds to develop, for example, solarize campaigns, community campaigns to encourage folks to take advantage of rebates that they might be getting to add solar panels to their house or do efficiency retrofits to their house. And so, yeah, we think that's actually a great idea. When I mentioned thinking about these funds as seed funding, that's exactly the type of thing I was thinking about. So how can you prepare your community to make the best use of future funding that's coming down the road? What is not an eligible use is thinking about EECBG funds as a match, as matching for other funds that you would try to get. So you can't use it as a cost match for something else, but you can definitely use it as a way to prepare your community for future funding. And I will try to get to some of the remaining questions in the chat as well as I'm sitting here. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Andi. Thank you so much. So now we're going to move over to our panel. It's my pleasure to introduce Tara Brown, who's the Senior Manager of Service Delivery at the Institute for Market Transformation. Tara is going to be facilitating a conversation with some mayors that we love. Stephen Williams of Huntington, West Virginia, Elizabeth Kautz of Burnsville, Minnesota, and proudly the past president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, Mayor Stephanie Orman of Bentonville, Arkansas, and Kelsey Rader, the Sustainability Officer for the City of Albuquerque. So Tara, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's great to see you today. I have a few questions that I've been hearing from different communities that I'd love to ask these leaders. And so the first one that I want to throw out to everyone is, how are you utilizing the EECBG in advancing your community's climate action plan? Who would like to get started for us?
Who wants to jump in? I'll jump in. So, hi, I'm Mayor Stephanie Orman of Bentonville, Arkansas. We've been working on a sustainability, operational agility, and energy efficiency plan. And so these funds help us to identify each of those categories and find projects that we've researched and that we feel like we will also have the return on investment to. And so these funds help us start that project. I'm a big believer in cities. We have a lot on our plate, especially with old infrastructure and different things. So when you're talking energy efficiency and being able to look at those things, but you're operating from a finite budget, it's difficult to be able to add those new projects in. And so these source funds will help us do that. So that's how we're using it.
Thank you, Mayor Kautz.
Thank you, Tara, and then hello, everyone. You know, this is really exciting because as a past president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, we were on the front line in the creation of EECBG during the Bush administration and worked in a bipartisan way with Senators Clinton and Norm Coleman. And then it was signed into law under Bush and funded under Obama. And so I'm so proud of the work that the U.S. Conference of Mayors have done. And what we have done, because it was also under my watch in the past, we used the, not just a grant program, but a competitive grant program. And we received $800,000 to transform our ICE center into a geothermal energy efficient building. So what are we doing this time as we move along with all of this? We're looking at transitioning all of our vehicles from a hybrid to, we have mostly all hybrid right now, to electric vehicles. And so we want to start that process right now on our capital improvement plan. The other is that we are members of 2 solar farms, and we continue to want to ensure that we have high energy efficient buildings. So we want to also put solar panels on our fire station and to create a grid within that building that uses a whole lot of electricity. And there is so much. We have a sustainability plan. I am really excited because as part of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, we signed a climate agreement when President Bush did not sign the Kyoto Protocol. And we have had a sustainability plan in action after signing that and then doing a white paper since 2009 and have exceeded a lot of the goals, but we still want to continue to reduce greenhouse gas and continue to look at how we reduce the emissions and fuel reductions for our fleet. There is so much that is on our plan. And everyone can find it on our website, and we have a dashboard that measures all of this. So I'm excited that we're doing this because this is the second round, when the first round came out in 2009 and 10. And I'm just proud. The U.S. Conference of Mayors really helped a great deal, Andy, in helping to put this model together and worked with the Department of Energy because you know, the model was at HUD with the CDBG program, and that this is modeled after that. So where the funds come directly to cities, and that's one of the great benefits, is that the funds come directly to cities to benefit the work that we're doing. And so I'm really excited about this, and it is a bipartisan effort.
That was great. Thank you, Mayor Kautz. And that is one amazing thing about this round of EECBG funding you hit on, is that included in this is electric vehicle and energy efficiency around the electric vehicle and greenhouse gas reduction. So that's something new that cities can take on. Yeah. Mayor Williams?
Carol, what we're doing in Huntington is really building upon several of the projects that we already have in place. We've been very active in the last 5 to 7 years on our brownfields development. And interestingly, there was one brownfield plant that had been just long shuttered that recently received some funding through another agency, through the Build Back Better Regional Challenge through the U.S. Department of Commerce. There's $7 million that's going for the renovation of a plant, and that plant is being used of all places in cold country for the development and installation of solar energy panels in West Virginia. The company's name, you'll love this, is Solar Holler. And they're right down the street from one of our new, again, a high profile project. We're building 2 new fire stations, and each of our fire stations, one of them is just 2 blocks down from this one brownfield plant that's being restored, is that they're going to be placing solar panels on each of our fire stations. And the purpose behind all of this is to do some high profile projects that the community is able to embrace. They're wanting to know the progress that we're making on each of the projects. We have a $15 million highway redesign that's coming right down the middle of the city. Well, part of that project that we're using some of this money for in the EECBG is for the lighting along the way. That entire entrance into the city has had dim lighting, but we are able to put more energy efficient lighting in this area and make it much brighter and safer. Well, lastly, City Hall is a 100-plus-year-old structure that we've been renovating everything. Well, we've done energy efficient windows and such, but we also have to do some things with our HVAC systems and everything to making them more energy efficient. And the point simply being, everything that we are doing in cold country that is sometimes looked upon with suspicion on energy conservation, what we're able to show is that we can be doing things that contribute to energy conservation, and it doesn't have to be fossil fuels. It doesn't have to be coal. We can simply be an energy state, and people are starting to embrace this as a result of these high profile projects.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. I'm so excited to hear more and see those projects. I think that's a really important thing that you touched on, is the fact that how can this money showcase what's possible to the rest of your community? Kelsey, with your climate action plan, how are you using this money to accomplish your climate action plan?
Thank you for the question, Tara, and thank you so much for having me. Luckily, Albuquerque has been putting a lot of pieces in place over the last several years to be ready to take advantage of this funding. In particular, in 2021, we released our finally updated climate action plan for the first time in 10 years. We took an approach where we worked with frontline communities directly and had them lead the process, letting us know from the ground up, from the folks who are going to be most impacted by climate change, what we should be prioritizing. And so loud and clear, we heard, of course, greenhouse gas emissions are important to reduce, but people really need to be feeling the impacts of these upgrades in their communities, in their homes and community centers as well. And so I'm really pleased to say and report that we've got a lot of exciting work ahead of us in a couple of different sectors with energy efficiency. In particular, we have done quite a bit of work with investment grade audits on city facilities. We've got about 1.2 million square feet of city facilities slated for updates that this block grant funding is certainly going to be assisting with. We also have deployed a really great community-led program where we are working with folks, hiring community representatives and neighborhood liaisons who can go into homes, can work aside technicians to ask folks what types of updates they'd like to see in their homes, and then perform those upgrades and audits to make sure that those homes that are experiencing 8 to 10% energy burdens, that we can make a serious difference there and do it in a way that doesn't feel intrusive, that government is overstepping. And so both of those projects are certainly candidates to receive funding. And as we continue to finalize our plans, we know that there's opportunities for electrifications and looking at heat pump opportunities as well. So plenty of good work and options for us ahead.
Thank you, Kelsey. I know the energy efficiency audits in my area, once they added multilingual auditors, it really expanded the reach. So excited to hear that you're working on something similar. You touched on community, and I'd love to hear from the mayors. Where does community engagement play a role in your EECBG? Have you done that already? Is that a part of the process, Mayor Couch?
Yes, thank you, Tara. Yes, absolutely. For us, it's all about participatory and having our citizens involved in all of this. So because when they're involved, now they have more information and they're going to react to all of it. Because right now with the a dashboard that we have, everybody can now put all of their results into the dashboard. So we have a community-wide understanding of how we're doing with all of the different success factors with our dashboard. So it is, we work with our businesses and we also work with our residents. And they're excited. They have been excited about all of this. And all of our businesses, I meet with them on a quarterly basis. And they report on some of the things that they're doing. And now they're also working with our staff to begin to propagate the dashboard so that we have a meter that shows how the community-wide is doing. And also we have a wonderful process where we have a vehicle that's called and the engagement vehicle of awesomeness, and it goes out into the community and work with our community members on all of these initiatives. So we want to make sure that Eva is also energy efficient, and she is all over the city with our staff. So yes, it is so important, and it's exciting when you see members of our community engaged in making sure that we continue to lead in the space of energy efficiency and protecting our environment and saving the planet.
That's awesome. We can't have a DOE federal funding webinar without some fun acronyms. So EVA is a new acronym I learned today. Mayor Williams, what is your community doing?
Andy ended up saying something earlier that I just grabbed onto immediately, is when she was talking about her principles to maximize our funding. Daniel Burnham, the famed architect of the late 19th century in Chicago, had is attributed with saying, make no little plans, they have no magic to stir men's blood. Our responsibility as leaders in our communities are to think big, think massively, dream big, so dream that they make you hyperventilate, and that helps draw the community in and gives them a level of excitement to do things. These are the very things that we're doing where I was saying that our fire stations, the Brownfields Center, Solar Holler, and others like that. When individuals start to hear those particular stories, those narratives, it's something that they're wanting to draw upon. The key is for us to be able to take these things and be able to plan to the future, not the next 2 to 3 years. Once again, thinking big, next 20 to 50 years, where do we want to see our community be moving forward? And this opportunity with EECBG's EECBG funding gives us the opportunity to be able to help people see what the art of possibility is. And all of those things give us the chance to leverage our dollars into more money than we ever imagined would be possible for projects such as these. I urge you always be saying at least a 5-to-1 match. If you're bringing something in, and I know that the EECBG can be used for matching for other things, but it's leveraging that opportunity to do other things. And if you go with a 5-to-1 match or something along those lines, it will always be much more than that. And it's amazing that our small community of 50,000 people has $514,700,000 of capital projects that are active and being driven specifically to help us be able to determine and develop climate efficiency within our community.
I would say
It's amazing. Thank you. Yes, Mayor Orman.
we're going to be really focused on the results from our projects and taking that data and being able to use that data with advocacy groups so that when we want to do more, we have the data that shows. So the two projects we're looking at is one, adding solar panels to our administrative services building. It's a square flat roof. We'll be working with an Arkansas company for the design installation of that, but also really collecting the data. We are fortunate in the city of Bentonville because we run our own electric department. So we have direct access to those meter readings. So we're going to know what our costs were for power prior to adding the solar panels. We're going to be able to track that very specifically. And then we hope to be able to provide that in a story with the data to support it to the public and get those advocacy groups on board with us. And we think that the message will allow us to attract, because we think the results will be there, that will allow us to track people from all political parties to really come together on these initiatives. The second initiative we're looking at is putting EV charging stations in our public parks. And we really looked at what our assets are. Because we run our own electric department, we know where our power sources are. We know the type of power that you've got to have close to those EV charging stations. And so we really looked at our infrastructure and our assets to be able to determine the projects that we want to put forward and be able, again, to collect that data on and be able to hopefully show the results and advocate for future projects with.
Thank you, Mayor Orman. We have time for one more question that I'll ask. And if any questions come through on the meeting chat, I'll have time for maybe one question from all of the participants. So my final question, Mayor Williams somewhat touched on, so Mayor Kautz, I'm going to kick it over to you, is what tactics should cities leverage? Mayor Williams talked about the 5-to-1 ratio. What tactics do you recommend these cities leverage to make the full potential out of this EECBG funding?
Yeah, thank you, Tara, for the question. I believe that when you're looking at making sure that you can accomplish your goals and objectives, you have to have a good plan in place. And that means that all of your staff members also all understand what it is. And then we communicate that to our community, both our residents and business communities. So it is about setting goals and strategic direction that allows people to make sure that they are on the same page, and there is always a helpline for them to understand what they can do. So we're always available to ensure that people can achieve the goals that they're setting for themselves, and then therefore for the city as a whole. But it is about always keeping our eye on those goals and the strategic directive, and then also all of the activities that they can engage in to make that happen for themselves.
That's great. I know, Kelsey, maybe you can chime in because you've always been an amazing planner when it comes to city staff. What tactics should other cities use to optimize this funding?
So just to build up what the mayor said, of course, making sure that our internal folks are organized, that we're ready, we're aware of who's got capacity, who doesn't, where can we get contract funding to be able to fill in the gaps. Beyond that, though, I really believe that nothing happens without good community support and good community contacts. Whenever we're getting that funding, we can have the best plans in the world, but making sure that our community partners are prepared to be able to administer this funding, that they're getting the support that they need to potentially have this be the first time they receive federal grant funding, and that they're aware of the stipulations that come with that and are getting that support, or understanding that we're tailoring our grant applications to make sure that they're fitting the needs of what our community partners are able to administer. We all have been experiencing unprecedented changes in terms of our capacity and supply chains, et cetera. And so I think just having those strong community partnerships and ensuring that we're speaking with them frequently, we're building that trust, and that we're making sure that government can tailor our own actions and our own support to the folks that need it. We're actually going to administer some of this funding on the ground. That, to me, those kinds of conversations are the most important.
Thank you. Mayor Orman, do you have any advice?
Our goal is really to leverage our community partners. We have a lot of businesses in the area that are very concerned with their workforce and making sure that they can attract employees here. And so when they're concerned about that, they tend to want to help us also with our environmental concerns and our energy efficiency concerns. And so again, taking the data from our projects, being able to show that to your community partners, and then asking them for that investment back into your city and your quality of life.
Great. And Mayor Williams, I'm sure you look like you have a few more pieces of advice.
There's a formula that we have kind of stumbled upon here that leads to a level of success, particularly in leveraging community resources. Communication and collaboration start to begin or come together to establish trust. As you communicate, collaborate, establishing trust, the eventual outcome is developing partnerships. Once again, communication, collaboration, trust, and partnerships. The result is hope within the community. This works on both sides of the ledger. The really good things, the nice investments in the community, but also when we're fighting crime, when we're fighting drug abuse and such as that. When you are communicating, collaborating, creating partnerships, establishing trust, hope does abound within the community. And as a result, the community raises up, and then you start to find that there are philanthropic organizations that are present in the community and nationally. We must point out the Bloomberg Foundation that is helping with this, helps communities all across the world, and we found them to be an absolutely wonderful partner because they come in and they'll help provide to you specific means to measure the success of your programs and being able to move forward. Whether you're a large city or a small city, it doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is that we all have talent hiding in plain sight. And we as leaders, that's got to be our mastermind, is to be able to give those individuals an opportunity to step up and be able to show what can be done in our communities.
Tara, if I can just add, I just want to call out that our staff member, Carolyn McFadden, is also on the line, and she is our sustainability manager. And so she's been answering some of the questions with regard to the hub. But let me tell you, when the city is out there and it's taking the lead on all of these things, corporations and our residents follow. And I can tell you that because of the work that we've been doing, to reduce greenhouse gas in Burnsville. We have a corporate privately owned power plant in Burnsville, the Black Dog Power Plant, and Tara, you know this. And what they did, and I was on site on the 13th of April 2015, when the last coal train came in, and it reduced greenhouse gas on their site 46%. And that's one of the things, is that we need to be boldly leading in this space, and then everybody else is going to follow. And that's what's happening here in Burnsville. And Carolyn can tell you that our citizens and our businesses are excited about the work that we're doing, and they love that we had created and the dashboard, so that they can all go in and see what's going on and how they can participate.
That's great, Mayor. And yes, dashboarding creates that transparency and accountability. Before I hand it off to Michelle, I just want to make the space. Is there any other final pieces of advice that you want to share? Be bold is a great place.
Yeah.
Be bold. Great. Thank you all for coming and sharing your experience and what you're planning for the future.
Yeah.
Michelle, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thank you, Tara, and thank you, mayors. I loved the focus in particular on data, and if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So
That's right.
that's also our big push is making sure that we know the results of these investments. We can tell the stories to communities and tell the story to the federal government and others who are wanting to understand what works. So before we end today's session, I want to hear from you. As always, we take a moment to do a quick Zoom poll, and so we will put that up on the screen. And again, just want to thank you all for joining us today, and make a special plug for the many resources and experts we have available to you as you develop these applications and continue on this journey to using these enormous federal resources. Experts like Tara and her colleagues at IMT, available to answer your questions, big and small. Also, and in partnership with the National League of Cities and Delivery Associates, we've been running a technical assistance boot camp for cities, which many of you know about and have participated in. But we're making the resources available from that boot camp for all cities, so you can learn from those experts on everything from effective community engagement to how to develop these data-driven applications, which are so important to the storytelling and the accountability and the deep understanding of what works. We have on the slide and in a chat a link to these resources, and so we encourage you to take advantage of them. They're there and they can make a huge difference. Like these infrastructure hub sessions are just at the beginning. There's all these other resources that we're hoping you'll take advantage of. So we'll also be sending them out after this session. We hope you'll join us for the next local infrastructure hub session on Wednesday, April 12th. We'll be exploring solutions and showcase the winners of the Safe Streets and Roads for All program. And we're also planning an exciting Earth Day celebration on Tuesday, April 25th. So we will be sending out more on that soon. And as always, you can find more information about the upcoming sessions, the resources, and all of the information we've been talking about on our website, which is localinfrastructure.org. So thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you on April 12th. Thanks so much.